Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, welcome to 6th PT presentation of communication philosophy. In this presentation will be delivered by me and two of my friends. My name is Muhammad Raihan Risnandia, person number 30, and my friend Anissa Putri Suwito, person number 4, and the last one is Vira Najah Nazihah, person number 26. Today we're gonna start from representation to mediation. From repressive theoretical point of view, semiotics turned out to be a philosophy of communication in a rather profound sense of the word. Here, theoretical science can be interpreted differently, but it doesn't change the argument that for some purpose, one can exclude the basic experience of the heresimax and epistemological results. A critical argues that a rhetorical approach is pragmatic, whereas a theoretical approach should not be understood as fundamentalist enterprise. One advantage is that it supports the Bayesian theory of science in public experience, which is sorely needed to balance formal propensity in semiotics. A theoretical perspective influences a semiotic view in many complex and often subtle way. Representation relation. In other words, semiosis can be characterized as the type activity of process that distinguish science from other kinds of activities and process. Accordingly, Peirce's only definition of the term is given is pragmatism, highlights the distinction between two principal modes of action. The hallmark of semiotics is that various action. Peirce often interprets a sign instead an object. A mark can be defined as something that actually presents something. Representation is the character of something based on morality which, to the production of certain mental effect, it may stand in the place of something else. The thing which has this character we refer to as its representative mental effect or mind is interpretation, the thing to which it stands its object. Representation is the character of something based on morality, which to the production of certain mental effect, it may stand in the place of something else. The thing which has this character I refer to as its representation, mental effect or mind, its interpretation or thought that's called object.
The dynamic of the object. The object describes sign. The relationship between the object and the sign should not be interpreted too narrow and not understood as a strict relationship. An absolute object is more logically inferred than an experience in reality. Therefore, it is possible that the set of signs need not draw anything except a system to explain representation and determination. Or immediate object or passive sign, whereas external or dynamic object are relates one that feels separated and active. An external or dynamic object can be defined as an object affected by a sign or as a reality which is in some way created to determine its sign. Purposive tendencies. To make a semiotic action more feasible is to reformulate questions and explore drafting style that give semiosis notions in the intended purpose of a character. Ransdell taught that the presence of object, signs, and translator would be sufficient in their puristic analysis. The theological view Peirce has of semiosis is that of semiosis coexists with a direct process of acting for a purpose. All interpreting signs has a purpose, and all acts of purpose interpreting signs. According to Shorts, semiosis is dependent on interpretations, which means that each sign action is relevant only to the purpose and efforts of some sign users. This purpose was not given in the relationship of the sign itself.
Interpretative effects. Semiotics are not limited to identifying the object of the sign, but a sign that also determines what is innovative, which Peirce calls as the interpreter. It is defined as any from whatsoever, which became an intermediary between an object and translators. Because both are determined by the object relative to interpretant, and determines the interpreter in reference to the object. So in such causing, the interpreter is determined by the object by mediation sign of this. The characterization is the result of random movements communication from the speakers and translators semiotics. But this determination is a little confusing because physics theory is growing slow. Semiosis would not cease even if understanding had been found by an interpreter. Even Peirce claims that the identification sequence is infinite. To have the commentator successfully come to their understanding at that time was judged to be imperfect. Furthermore, Peirce often reveals that interpretation is the same as interpretation. According to Peirce about the semiotic, submitting to a thesis that semiotics are infinite is very distracting. The issue was discussed frequently in some discussion, but not one accord was agreed upon. Even structural understanding is unacceptable. Peirce mentioned something in his letter to Welby. Peirce explains that an interpreter should not be reasonable. In the provision, we consider the interpretation to be not a thought, but rather a treatment or experience, can even be summed up quality of feeling. In another statement, reference is made to examination through the dichotomy mentioned earlier, as forms as first, second, and third. Then it was about the dichotomy that both noticed that the emotional interpreter could be categorized as a sign. After the argument of the statement, all are committed to the same conclusion, albeit it is revealed that in conclusion, he says that we should let the final interpretation of the signs talk not relatively equal of what is interpreted by the same previous sign. From the standpoint of pragmatics, matters that the elite interpreters who have the best overall, almost all semiosis can be constructed to tend to caution or the establishment or tradition or practices, considering the original context.
Transmission and transparency. According to Gurnley in 1973, what is the sign of the mediator's function? According to Colapietro, the term mediations is better than representations to characterize sign function. Mediation means a sign serving as a mediator between an object and its translator, while a picture shows a sign representing an object for an interpreter. Representation tends to be a restriction compared to a mediator. What is important in this process is how to give the signs so it can define meaning through mediation with transparency. The purpose of this process is to point out the truth. That's it. Thank you for watching.